Hello friends and welcome to SSC Monk. This is Nayana and today we are going to look at the most challenging and highly repeated error detection questions that have been asked in the SSC CGL 2025 examination. Now I know that there are many rules, there are many concepts that you're already very familiar with. But there are certain other concepts that you often find trickier and more confusing than the others, especially when you're in an examination hall, when you're under the examination pressure. Some concepts seem confusing than others. And today, our goal is to completely master those core grammar rules that are often more difficult than the others so that you can easily pick them out when you come across a question itself. Okay. And regarding the strategy of this particular session, I have compiled a set of questions, each of which represents a particular grammatical concept that you are supposed to know regarding English language. And through these target questions, through these selected questions, we'll obviously look at what the error is in that particular question. But more than that, we'll also take a comprehensive look at all the related rules and the structural traps that are associated with that particular concept. Okay. So if the strategy is clear, if the goal is clear, and if you're ready, we shall move on to the first question. Okay. The manager, along with her entire team, expects that the project will be completed before the deadline and they shall submit the final report on Friday. I'll repeat it. The manager, along with her entire team, expects that the project will be completed before the deadline and they shall submit the final report on Friday. So, can you find out which part contains the error and what the error is? The error lies in the third part. The error lies in the third part. And what is the error here? You see the words shall submits, right? You see the word shall submits. Now you know that shall is a modal auxiliary. You know that shall is a modal auxiliary. And we have learned that along with modal auxiliaries, we only use the bare infinitive form. We only use the bare infinitive form or the V1 form without any S or ES addition. So along with modal auxiliary shall, you will only use the bare infinitive form. But here, instead of V1 or the bare infinitive form, we have used the V5 form. So this is wrong. Instead of submits, it should be they shall submit the final report on Friday. They shall submit the final report on Friday. Now, which are the modal auxiliary verbs that you're familiar with? You have will, would, shall, should, then can, could, may, might, must, etc. Right? We have all these verbs, modal auxiliary verbs, and along with these modal auxiliary verbs, we always have to use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form. Now, you are already familiar with the 5 different forms. We have V1, V2, V3, V4, and V5, where V1 is the base form of the verb. The base form of the verb, where you have no endings. There is no S, C, S, ing, etc. So that is the base form. Then you have V2. V2 is the simple past form. Then you have V3, which is the past participle form. Then you have V4, which is the present participle form of V1 plus ing. And then you have V5, which is the third person singular form. Third person singular form, where you have the S or ES addition to the verbs, to the base form of the verbs. So we have already studied that along with modal verbs, we only use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form. Okay. See, now there is another trap that lies in this particular question. When you look at the statement, you take note of the phrase along with. Along with. We have studied certain phrases like along with, then you have together with, in addition to, as well as, accompanied by, etc. We have studied that in phrases like these, we always have to use a verb that agrees with the first subject. That agrees with the first subject. The verb has to agree with the first subject. Now, in this sentence, you know the manager is S1, subject 1, now the first subject. Then you have entire team, which is the second subject. So here we know that the verb has to agree with the first subject. So when you look at the sentence, you see expects, which is a singular verb. which is a singular verb. And when you look at the subject, when you look at the first subject, you know that it is a singular subject. So when you look at the sentence, you feel like there is nothing wrong in the sentence, because here you have singular subject, you have the phrase along with, and then you know the verb also has to be singular because the first subject is singular. And when you look at the verb, it is expects. Suppose in this question they have given you an option where there is no error, then there is a possibility that some students might go and check that option. Why? Because here there is a clear subject verb agreement in the first part of the sentence. But in this sentence, the focus is not on the phrase along with, it is on the use of modal auxiliary shall and the bare infinitive. But here, instead of using the bare infinitive or the V1 form or the base form, they have used the V5 form, and that is the error here. So whenever you come across a question, make sure that you read the question clearly. You look at each and every part of the sentence so that it is easier for you to eliminate the portions that are not necessary. Sometimes the error may not be in the first part. See here itself, when you see along with, immediately most of the students will think about the rule regarding along with, together with, etc. But here that is not the case. They have used the error, or they have put the error in the use of the modal auxiliary and the bare infinitive form. Okay, so make that clear. Now we will move on to the next question. Neither the students nor the teacher were ready for the sudden fire drill, leading to a moment of confusion before everyone evacuated. Neither the students nor the teacher were ready for the sudden fire drill, leading to a moment of confusion before everyone evacuated. So here what is wrong? So here the error is in part 2. The error is in part 2. What is the error here? Here they have written were ready, but it is not were ready. It is was ready, was ready. How did we know that it is was ready? Because here you see the phrase neither nor. Here you see the correlative conjunction. The correlative conjunction. Neither nor, either or. All these are correlative conjunctions. So when two subjects are joined by a correlative conjunction, the verb has to agree with the subject that is closest to it. Okay, when you have two subjects that are joined together by a correlative conjunction, the verb has to agree with the second subject or the subject that is closest to it. It will not look at the first subject at all. So here you have students, which is a plural subject, and here you have teacher, which is a singular subject. Which correlative conjunction have we used here? We have used neither nor, and we have studied that along with correlative conjunctions like neither nor, either or, etc., the verb will always have to agree with the subject that is closest to it. Okay, so no matter what the form of the first subject is, we will eliminate it completely. We will only look at the subject that is closest to the verb. Okay, I hope that is clear to you. Now, if the order was reversed, if the sentence was neither the teacher nor the students, then the use of where would be correct, because then the students will come to the second position and the verb will have to agree with the second subject, which is students. So therefore, the sentence would have been correct. But here, the subject that is closest to the verb is a singular subject. So we have to use the singular form of the verb. Okay. So along with correlative conjunctions like either or, neither nor, etc., we have to use a verb. We have to use a verb that agrees with the subject that is closest to it. And in the first question, we have studied that along with phrases like together with, in addition to, as well as, along with, accompanied by, etc., you have to use the verb that agrees with the first subject. Okay, so make this clear. Now take a look at this question. Now, this is one of the most difficult or the most challenging questions of SSC CGL 2025 exam. We'll take a look at what is so challenging in this particular question. The myriad challenges confronting modern urban planners, ranging from sustainable infrastructure to social equity, often demands an interdisciplinary approach to yield effective solutions. The myriad challenges confronting modern urban planners, ranging from sustainable infrastructure to social equity, often demands an interdisciplinary approach to yield effective solutions. Now look at the sentence carefully. Like at a first glance, it looks very heavy, it looks very academic. You have a lot of difficult vocabulary in the sentence. Like for example, you have myriad, then you have sustainable infrastructure, social equity, interdisciplinary approach. There are very difficult words, right? Very bulky words. Now that is why this question seems very overwhelming to you, seems very challenging to you. So, when you come across such sentences, when you come across such questions, particularly in error detection and sentence improvement questions, remember that you are not being tested for your vocabulary skills. Okay. You have separate section for that. You have questions on synonyms, antonyms, one-word substitutions, etc., where you are actually tested for your vocabulary skill. These questions, the error detection questions, the sentence improvement questions, are mainly included to test your knowledge of the English grammar, to test whether you have a basic knowledge of English grammar. And in most of the cases, the error will be in the subject-verb agreement portion. 80% of the time, the error will be in subject-verb agreement. So what happens? Why are they including such long sentences with such difficult words for basic subject-verb agreement rules? There are two reasons why they do that. First, definitely when the sentence becomes long, it takes more time to read the sentence. It will take up your time. You will have to spend more time answering a particular question. So that is one thing. Another thing is, at least for some students, when you see such large words, such difficult words, words that you're not familiar with, you tend to skip the question. Now, you may be very familiar with subject verb agreement rules, you may be familiar with all the basic grammar concepts, but the moment you see such difficult words, words that you're not familiar with, you will have that tendency to skip that question and move ahead, thereby losing your marks. So the examiner knows that this is how your brain works, this is how your mind works, and that is why they include such unnecessary words in a particular sentence. Now, before we answer this question, I'll tell you what the sentence means. Okay. But you have to remember that in the examination hall, even if you do not understand the meaning of the sentence, it is okay for such questions. Okay, you do not have to spend time understanding the meaning. If you understand the meaning, it is very easy for you. It is very it has another advantage for that. But even if you don't remember, you have to just focus on the rules that you have studied. Now, since this is a practice session, I'll tell you what the meaning of the sentences, and then we'll see what the error is. Okay. So basically what the sentence says is that modern urban planners or modern city planners, they have to face several challenges. Now myriad means countless, countless or various. Okay, the meaning of myriad is various or countless. So modern urban planners or city planners, they have to face various challenges. Confront means face a difficult situation, face a difficult situation. So modern urban planners have to face several challenges. They have to face several challenges. Now, what are the challenges that they have to face? They have to check whether their constructions, their buildings are sustainable, that they are environment friendly, eco-friendly, and they have to check whether it ensures justice to all social classes. Okay, so these are some of the challenges that these urban planners have to face. Sustainable infrastructure, social equity, all these are the challenges that modern city planners have to face. And because of these challenges, they have to use an interdisciplinary approach. So instead of using just one approach, you have to look at several perspectives. They have to look at several opinions. They have to include several disciplines before they make a final decision in order to get an effective or in order to get better results. So that is the meaning of the sentence. Modern city planners, they have to encounter or they have to face various challenges like sustainable infrastructure and social equity. And therefore, these challenges require them to use an interdisciplinary approach. Okay, so that is the meaning of this particular sentence. Now, what is wrong here? What is wrong here? The error is in the use of the word demands. It is in the use of the word demands. Why is it wrong? It is wrong because here the main subject is challenges. The main subject is challenges, and challenges is a plural subject. It is a plural subject. So the verb also has to be a plural verb. So you have to use demand. You have to use demand. Now, how did we identify that challenges is the primary subject or the main subject? So in such questions, how will you identify which is a primary subject or which is the main subject? Check for phrases that comes between two commas. Check for phrases that comes between two commas. So here you can see one comma and here you can see another comma, and then you can see a participial phrase. Here you can see a participle ranging from, and this is a participial phrase. So this portion that comes between two commas is not relevant to the meaning of the sentence. It is not relevant to the meaning of the sentence. Even if you exclude that particular phrase, even if you exclude that particular clause, nothing is going to happen to that sentence. Why? Because this is just an example of the challenges that they have to face. It has even if you eliminate the sentence, I'll read the sentence without using these phrases. The myriad challenges confronting modern urban planners often demands an interdisciplinary approach to yield effective solutions. Is there any change in the meaning of the sentence? No, right? There is nothing, there is no change that happens in the sentence even if you remove this part. So whenever in such questions, whenever you see a phrase that comes between two commas, eliminate it completely. Okay, eliminate it completely. That itself gives eliminates words like infrastructure, social equity, etc. So all these are singular subjects and singular nouns, so that will eliminate the confusion, that will reduce the confusion there. Now look at the first part of the sentence. The myriad challenges confronting modern urban planners. Put this in bracket. Confronting modern urban planners. What is happening here? See, confronting modern urban planners is a modifier. It is a modifier. Why is it a modifier? Because it tells you what kind of challenges that you are talking about. What kind of challenges are we talking about? Now, if the examiner were to give you the sentence like this, the myriad challenges often demands an interdisciplinary approach, you can very easily, very simply identify challenges as the main subject and demands as the verb that is used here, which is wrong because they have to use a plural verb. And it is very easy. You can easily find out the answer in less than 5 to 10 seconds. So that is why they have added all these other phrases, all these other modifiers, descriptions, etc. in order to confuse you. Now this confronting modern urban planners, it is basically a modifier which tells you what kind of challenges you are talking about. The myriad challenges, what kind of challenges? The challenges that confront modern urban planners. Okay, so it does not change the form or the plurality or the singularity of the subject. It just gives you more information about what the challenge is. Okay. So whenever you come across such questions, eliminate all that comes between two commas, eliminate the prepositional phrases, eliminate the modifiers, descriptive clauses, etc. And then you will be left with only a single subject. Look at the form of that subject and use a verb accordingly. Okay, so that is the rule here. Now, to check whether you have understood this question, we look at two other questions. Now look at these two questions. So here we will not look at the meaning of the sentence because our focus is only on to find the error in the question or error in the statement. Now the first question. The profound implications of the burgeoning quantum theories, a field still largely inscrutable to the uninitiated, remains a contentious subject amongst the most eminent physicists engaging in spirited academic discourse. The profound implications of the burgeoning quantum theories, a field still largely inscrutable to the uninitiated, remains a contentious subject amongst the most eminent physicists engaging in spirited academic discourse. Now again, if you look at the sentence, there are a whole lot of difficult words, a whole lot of bulky, academic, very unnecessary terms in the sentence. We are going to see how we can find out the answer without even understanding the meaning of these words. Okay. What did I tell you earlier? I told you that in such sentences, if you can see a phrase that comes between two commas and if you can eliminate it without changing the meaning of the sentence, go on and do it. Okay. So here you can see one comma here, another one here. So what will you do? You eliminate this portion first. Okay. A field still largely inscrutable to the uninitiated. What is the sentence doing? It is basically describing quantum theories. It is just a description. It is just a modifier that describes what quantum theories is or what quantum theories are. Okay. So you can easily eliminate that without changing the meaning of the sentence. Now coming to the previous part. The profound implications of the burgeoning quantum theories. What do you see here? You see a preposition. You see the preposition of. And whatever comes after this preposition is the prepositional object. This is the prepositional object. So this thing can be considered as a prepositional phrase. Now, so what is the purpose of a prepositional phrase? A prepositional phrase is simply another modifier or a descriptive phrase that tells you more about the subject. So you can also eliminate that without changing the meaning of the sentence. So the profound implications. Now you are just left with the main subject, which is the implications, which is the main subject. Now implications is a plural subject. It is a plural subject. Now you come to the verb, which is a verb here. Remains. Remains is the verb here. Now here we have used a singular verb. So this is wrong. Instead of that, you have to use the plural form, which is remain. Okay, is that clear? So once you eliminate the a phrase that comes between two commas, or when you eliminate the prepositional phrase, descriptive clauses, modifiers, etc., you are just left with what is necessary, which will always include just a single subject. Okay. Now, again, we'll check this once again. Look at the second question. The profound impact of digital technology on, on societal norms, a phenomenon universally acknowledged by sociologists, are increasingly becoming a topic of interdisciplinary academic debate. The profound impact of digital technology on societal norms, a phenomenon universally acknowledged by sociologists, are increasingly becoming a topic of interdisciplinary academic debate. Now, what will we do first? What do we see here? We see a phrase that comes between two commas and you eliminate that completely. Now, the profound impact of digital technology on societal norms. Again, you have a preposition here and then you have the prepositional object. So this comprises a prepositional phrase. This is a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase which also you can eliminate. Now we are left with the profound impact. Here you have just one impact. Here we had many implications. Here we had just one impact. So this is a singular subject. And what have we used here? We have used a plural verb, which is wrong. You have to use the singular verb is. Okay. So the profound impact of digital technology on societal norms, a phenomenon universally acknowledged by sociologists, is increasingly becoming a topic of interdisciplinary academic debate. Okay. So whenever you come across such questions in error detection part, you have to eliminate the prepositional phrases, the descriptive clauses, the modifiers, all these in order to get the main subject. Okay. And then look for the subject verb agreement part. Now we will move on to the fourth question. The increase in the number of unresolved cases and the lack of clear guidelines from the authorities has contributed significantly to the confusion surrounding the recent procedural changes. The increase in the number of unresolved cases and the lack of clear guidelines from the authorities has contributed significantly to the confusion surrounding the recent procedural changes. Now, what is wrong here? The error is in part 3 in the use of the auxiliary verb has. This is wrong. Instead of has, you have to use have. Why? Why do we use have here? Because here you can see the first noun phrase, the increase in the number of unresolved cases. You have noun phrase 1. Now you have the second one, the lack of clear guidelines from the authorities. The lack of clear guidelines from the authorities, which is the second noun phrase. Now you have one noun phrase joined to another noun phrase by the conjunction and. Here you find and. See? So you have one noun phrase, second noun phrase, and these two are joined together by the conjunction and. When you see such a structure, you have to consider it as a compound plural subject. A compound plural subject. Okay. So even if these noun phrases are singular, even if the first subject is singular, even if the second subject is singular, it doesn't matter, because when two singular subjects are joined together by the conjunction and, it constitutes a compound plural subject. Therefore, you have to use a plural verb. Since we have a compound plural subject, you have to use a plural verb have. See, we know that 1 plus 1 equals 2. Or you can say 1 and 1 equals 2. You know, one is singular, but when they are joined together by and, you have a plural number. You have a plural number. Similarly, no matter whether the subjects are singular, when they are joined together by and, it becomes a compound plural subject, and therefore you have to use the plural verb along with it. Now the fifth question. The Venerable Institution aims to both preserve ancient texts and promoting critical scholarship among its burgeoning community of young researchers. The Venerable Institution aims to both preserve ancient texts and promoting critical scholarship among its burgeoning community of young researchers. What is the error here? Now, burgeoning means developing or emerging or evolving. All these are the meanings of burgeoning. Here, the error is in part 2. Can you tell me what the error is? It is in the use of the ing form of the verb. It is in the use of the ing form of the verb. Why is it wrong? Because here, in the first part of the sentence, you can see an infinitive verb. You can see an infinitive structure, an infinitive form. to preserve. And then you see the conjunction and. The conjunction and. So when two verbs are joined together by and, when two verbs are joined together by and, it should be in the same structure and form. It should be in the same structure and form. But here when you see on the left side of and, you have the to infinitive structure. You have the to infinitive structure, and on the right side you have the V1 plus ing or the gerund form, which is wrong. Both of this have to be in the same structure or the same form. So here if it is to preserve, here also it should be to promote. To promote. But since we have already used to here, you can use the same to for both the structures, and instead of promoting, you can simply write promote. Promote. Even if you put a to here, it is not wrong, but instead of repeating, in grammar, in English, we do not actually repeat the same elements. So we have used this to, and it applies to both preserving ancient text and promoting critical scholarship. So therefore, you can use promote. Promote. Okay. Now the next question. She had barely finished writing her essay, then the power went out, leaving her work unsaved and her progress lost. She had barely finished writing her essay, then the power went out, leaving her work unsaved and her progress lost. So I'm pretty sure that you all know the answer for this question. Here you find the adverb barely. You find the adverb barely. And you know that along with adverbs like hardly, barely, scarcely, rarely, we always use the word when. We always use the word when. Okay, so this is wrong. It is not then, it is when. So she had barely finished writing her essay when the power went out. So along with barely, hardly, scarcely, rarely, etc., you use the conjunction. Similarly, you have another one, no sooner. No sooner. Along with no sooner, you always use than. No sooner than. Hardly, scarcely, barely, when. So study these two structures. So before we move on to the next question, we'll talk a little about these adverbs. Now, hardly, scarcely, barely, rarely, all these are negative adverbs. All these are negative adverbs. So when you use them in a sentence, make sure that you do not use another negative verb, negative word along with it. For example, you should not say rarely have I never eaten a kiwi. You should never use this sentence. This is wrong. Why? Because rarely itself is negative. So you do not need another negative word along with it. Instead, you can say, rarely have I ever eaten a kiwi. Or you can say, I have never eaten a kiwi. Both of these are right. But when remember that you should only use one negative word in a particular sentence in order to indicate a negation. If you are using adverbs like rarely, hardly, scarcely, barely, etc., never use words like never, not, none, etc. Okay. Instead, you can say, rarely have I ever eaten a kiwi, or you can simply say, I have never eaten a kiwi. Similarly, if you see in this sentence, I have inverted the structure. I have inverted the structure. I have used subject after the verb. We all know that the usual structure, the general structure of a sentence is subject plus verb plus object. But when we use adverbs like hardly, rarely, scarcely, barely, etc., when these come in the first position, when you have these adverbs in the first position, these negative adverbs in the first position, you have to remember that there is an inversion of the structure. The verb will come before the subject. The verb will come before the subject. For example, we say, hardly had I arrived when she left. Hardly had I arrived when she left. It is not hardly I had arrived when she left. Whenever you see these adverbs, negative adverbs like rarely, hardly, scarcely, barely, etc., in the first position, there is an inversion of structure. The verb will come before the subject. Okay, so keep these two things in mind. Along with these negative adverbs, do not use another negative word. And when these adverbs come in the first position, make sure that there is an inversion of subject and verb positions. Okay, so that is all about this question. Seventh question. The professor postponed the discussion until the research would be published to maintain confidentiality of the findings. The professor postponed the discussion until the research would be published to maintain confidentiality of the findings. So here the error is in part 2. The error is in part 2. What is the error here? It is in the use of the modal auxiliary would be. Would be. This is wrong here. Why is it wrong? Because in this question you can see the conjunction until. In along with time conjunctions like until, when, before, after, etc. When these words are used to indicate a future event, you will not use a future tense. Okay. If you are using these time conjunctions to indicate a future event, you will never use a future tense along with it, because these conjunctions itself refers to a future event. So you do not need another future tense in order to indicate that the action happens in the future. So in this sentence, you have the professor postponing the discussion. When do you postpone the discussion? When you want to do it at a later date. For example, if a discussion is to be held today and I'm not able to attend the meeting today, I will postpone it to a day in the future. So you're postponing it to a day in the future. So here the discussion is postponed until itself is a future event. It itself indicates a future timeline. Therefore, you will not use another future tense along with it. You will simply use the simple present tense. Okay. If you have the time clauses, time conjunctions like until, when, before, after, etc. to indicate a future event, then again you will not use a future tense. Instead, you will use a simple present tense. So instead of would be published, you will simply put it as is published. The professor postponed the discussion until the research is published to maintain confidentiality of the findings. Okay, so remember that along with time conjunctions like until, before, when, after, etc., never use a future tense in order to indicate the future event again, because these conjunctions itself indicates a future. So you have to use the simple present tense. Next question. Seldom we realize how fortunate we are to have access to clean water and healthy food. Seldom we realize how fortunate we are to have access to clean water and healthy food. What is wrong here? Here, the error is in the structure of the sentence. The error is in the structure of the sentence. Here also we have started with the negative adverb. We have started with the negative adverb. And what did we study a little earlier regarding negative adverbs? Whenever we start a sentence with a negative adverb, the usual sentence structure has to be inverted. The usual sentence structure is subject plus verb plus object. When you have a negative adverb in the beginning, then you have to invert the structure to verb plus subject. Verb plus subject, and most of the cases this will be an auxiliary verb. That is, if a sentence contains both auxiliary verb and a main verb, then and the sentence requires an inversion, then the structure of the sentence will be auxiliary verb plus subject plus main verb plus object. But if there is only main verb, there is no auxiliary verb, then the main verb precedes the subject. Okay. Now, before we answer the question, we have studied the rules of inversion. We have studied the rules of inversion. One of the main cases where we use inversion is regarding questions. Regarding questions. Where do you live? Where do you live? Here you have the verb coming before the subject, right? In a normal sentence, we say you live here. You live here. You have subject. But in questions, you have the verb coming before the subject. So there is an inversion in the structure. Another case of inversion is regarding negative adverbs in the first position. Negative adverbs in the first position. Whenever you use a negative adverb like seldom, hardly, rarely, scarcely, never, we always use an inversion. Instead of writing seldom we realize, we have to use seldom do we realize. Seldom do we realize. The auxiliary verb comes before the subject. Now, why have we used do? Why have we used do? Tell me why. Because here the main verb realize is in the simple present tense. It is in the simple present tense. And along with simple present tense, you use the verb auxiliary verb do. So inversion for negative adverbs is auxiliary plus subject plus main verb, and these are the most commonly used negative adverbs. Okay. You also have barely. Okay, so the ninth question. The consensus was not that the data itself was flawed, but that its interpretation by the junior analysts were overly optimistic given the volatile market conditions and the inherent uncertainties. The consensus was not that the data itself was flawed, but that its interpretation by the junior analysts were overly optimistic given the volatile market conditions and the inherent uncertainties. So we already dealt with this type of question in the first part of our class. What do we do here? In order, we have to find out the main subject of the sentence. You have to find out the main subject of the sentence. How will you find out the main subject? Here, when you look at this, you know that this part is not necessary. Why? Because it comes between two commas. You can eliminate that. Now here, but that its interpretation by the junior analysts. Here again, you see a prepositional phrase. You see a prepositional phrase because here you say preposition by and then you have the object for that. So this is a prepositional phrase. This also gives you more information about the subject. Interpretation. It tells you more about the subject. Interpretation. So the consensus was that its interpretation was overly optimistic. Was overly optimistic. Why? Because interpretation is a singular subject. You have to use the singular verb along with that. Okay. So similar to how we did the initial questions, you eliminate the part that comes between the two commas and then you look for any prepositional phrase and you find the prepositional phrase. And what is the subject that comes just before the prepositional phrase? It is interpretation. It is a singular subject, interpretation. So you have to use the singular verb was. Okay. I hope this kind of question is now clear to you. We discussed 4 models of these same type of question. Okay. The 10th question. It was not until she finished her degree and gained some experience did she feel confident enough to start her own business. It was not until she finished her degree and gained some experience did she feel confident enough to start her own business. Now here in this question we are going to study about the third case of inversion. If you remember, we already studied 2 cases of inversion. The first is regarding interrogator statements, or in questions we use the verb before the subject. There is an inversion in the usual structure of the sentence. Similarly, whenever we use a negative adverb like seldom, rarely, scarcely, little, never, hardly, etc., you use again we use inversion. We invert the positions of the subject and the verb when it comes in the first position. Okay, when it is placed at the beginning of the sentence. Now we move on to the third case of inversion, which is regarding the use of not until. Not until. Now not until is a subordinate conjunction. A subordinate conjunction. So whenever you come across the subordinate conjunction not until in the beginning of the sentence, remember that this has to be in the beginning. In the beginning of the sentence, then you have to use inversion. Then you have to use inversion, which means you have the verb plus subject. This can be the auxiliary verb plus subject plus main verb or main verb plus. So in the sentence you find not until, and when you look at the structure of the sentence, you have subject that comes after the verb, which means that there is an inversion that took place in the sentence. But what happened here? Here not until is not in the beginning of the sentence. It is not in the beginning of the sentence. Here we already have a pronoun and a verb, or a subject and a verb, and then after that we have the structure not until. So here not until follows a general statement structure. You have the subject plus verb plus not until. So this is a normal statement. There is no need for an inversion here. You can simply write it was not until she finished her degree and gained some experience that she felt confident enough to start her own business. There is no need of inversion here because here not until does not come in the beginning of the sentence. Okay, so by now we have studied 3 cases of inversion. One is regarding interrogative statements. Second is the use of negative adverbs in the first position. And the third is the use of subordinate conjunction not until in the beginning of the sentence. Okay. Next question. The new algorithm, designed to process vast amounts of data, promises to revolutionize our approach to analytics, but it also raises concerns about data privacy and ethical implications. The new algorithm, designed to process vast amounts of data, promises to revolutionize our approach to analytics, but it also raises concerns about data privacy and ethical implications. Do you know what is wrong here? Yes, it is regarding the use of the verb rises. Rises. Now, if you have studied verbs, we have studied two classifications of verbs, which is transitive and intransitive verbs. Transitive and intransitive verbs. Transitive verbs are those that require a direct object. Those that require a direct object. And here there is no object. Intransitive verbs does not require an object. Okay, so transitive verbs requires an object and intransitive does not require an object. So here the error is in part 3 in the use of the verb rises, because rises is actually an intransitive verb, but here we have a direct object concerns. Here we have a direct object concerns. It raises what? It raises concerns. So we have an object here. So instead of using rises, we have to use the transitive form. We have to use the transitive form, which is a transitive verb that means to lift something up. It is raises. Raises, it is the transitive verb, because a transitive verb requires an object, and in this sentence we have an object. We have the object concerns. So we need a transitive verb and not the intransitive verb. So you have similar pairs of verbs, similar pairs of transitive and intransitive verbs, which are often asked in your exam. We'll take a look at these verbs. First is rise and raise. We already said raise. Raise means to lift something up. Raise means to lift something up. So there is an object in there is a need of an object in raise. When we use the verb raise, we need an object. That is why we have used raise here, because here we have the object concerns. Here we have the object concerns, and therefore the verb that comes before it should be a transitive verb. Similarly, rise. Rise is a natural process. Rise means to go up by itself, to go up naturally. You're not lifting something up. It goes up on its own. So it is an intransitive verb. It does not require an object. Similarly, you have fall and fell. Fall and fell. Lie and lay. Fall and fell and lie and lay. Fall. Fall means to drop down naturally. To drop down naturally. There is no object, so it is an intransitive verb. Now fell. To fell means to cut trees, to cut something down. That is the meaning of fell. So it is, here you are cutting something. So it requires an object. So it is a transitive verb. Now lie. Lie means to rest, lying down. You're lying down on your back, you're resting. So there also you do not require an object, so it is an intransitive verb. Lay. Lay means to place something down. To place something down. So there also you require an object. There is a something there. So you require an object. So it is a transitive verb. So remember that when you come across these words in the question, check if there is an object in the sentence. If there is an object, go for the transitive verb. If there is no object, go for the intransitive verb. For example, consider the sentence, I felt tired, so I laid down on the bed. Laid down on the bed. Now in this sentence, what are you implying? You are saying that you are tired and you wanted to rest. That is why you lie down on the bed. Now, laid. Laid is the past form or the V2 form of lay. V2 of lay. We know that lay is a transitive verb. It requires an object and it means to place something down. But when you are lying down on the bed, when you are going to take rest, are you placing something down? Is there a direct object requirement there? No, you are simply resting. You are simply resting, which means we have to use the form of lie. We have to use the form of the intransitive verb lie. And what is the V2 form of lie? It is lay. It is lay. So instead of lay down, you have to put I lay down on the bed. I felt tired, so I lay down on the bed. Laid is the past of lay, which is a transitive verb. It is wrong in this context because here we are not referring to a transitive verb. Here we are simply saying we are going to rest. Okay. So I'll give you the 5 forms of lie and lace. Similarly, there are 5 forms of raise and rise, fall and fell, etc., which you have to look up before you go for the exam. I'll give you the 5 forms of lie and lay. Okay. V1, V2, V3, V4, and V5. First, lie, which is in the intransitive verb. V1 is lie, V2 is lay, V3 is lane, V4 is lying, and V5 is lies. Next, for lay, the transitive verb you have lay, laid, laid, laying, and lays. Okay, so these are the lays. Okay, so these are the 5 different verb forms of lie and lay, lie transitive and lie intransitive and lay transitive. Okay, similarly look up the 5 forms of fall and fell, raise and rise, etc. before you go for your exam. Next question. Hardly did the manager knew that his decision would trigger such a massive protest among the employees. Now what is the error here? The error is in part 1. Why is it wrong? What is wrong there? Because here, see here you already see that there is an inversion, right? You already see there is an inversion here. You have the verb, auxiliary verb, you have the subject and the main verb. Because we have used a negative adverb hardly in the first part of the sentence, or in the beginning of the sentence we have the negative adverb hardly, and there is a structure inversion happening. So that is correct. But what is wrong here? The use of the verb knew. The use of the verb knew. Because we already know that did is the past tense. Did denotes the past tense. The auxiliary verb did denotes the past tense. So when you use the auxiliary verb did in a sentence, you do not have to use another past tense in the same sentence. So the main verb can simply be in the base form. The same main verb can simply be in the base form or the V1 form, which is no. Just no. So whenever you use the auxiliary form of do, the past tense auxiliary form of do, which is did in a sentence, you never repeat that past tense in the main verb. You simply put the main verb in the base form. Okay. So did is already there in the sentence. Instead of using the past tense knew, you have to use the V1 form or the base form. No. So hardly did the manager know that his decision would trigger such a massive protest among the employees. Okay. So along with do, does, did, etc., you use the base form of the verb. You know that do is in the simple present tense, did is in the simple past tense. So these 3 auxiliary verb itself indicates the tense. So these 3 itself indicate the tense. Do, does, did itself indicate the tense of the sentence. So you do not have to indicate the tense in the main verb. You can simply use the base form of the main verb. Okay. So next question, the training program of the new coach was more effective than the previous coach as it offered better structure and helped participants stay focused for a greater portion of the day. The training program of the new coach was more effective than the previous coach as it offered better structure and helped participants stay focused for a greater portion of the day. So if you look at the second part of the sentence, you come across a word more effective. Come across the words more effective, and you know that it is the comparative degree. The comparative degree. So why have we used a comparative degree here? Because we are comparing one attribute of one single attribute or single character or single trait of two individuals. One trait of two individuals or two persons or two things. Okay. We use a comparative degree when you want to compare one trait of two individuals or two persons or two things. So here the comparison is between the training program of the new coach and the previous coach. Okay. So here we have clearly said that we are comparing one single trait of two individuals. But in the sentence, when you look at the sentence, you find that in one part of the sentence, you have training program. You have training program. And in the second part, it is compared to the previous coach and not the program of the previous coach. We use a comparative degree to compare one single trait of two individuals. One single trait of two individuals. So here the training program of the new coach has to be compared with the training program of the previous coach and not the coach himself or herself. Okay, so that is the error here. Instead of using than the previous coach, this is the error part. Part 2 contains the error. So instead of writing than the previous coach, they should have written than that of the previous coach. Than that of the previous coach. Here, the that refers to the training program because we know that comparative degree is used to compare one similar trait of two individuals. So here, if it is a training program of the new coach, then it has to be compared with the training program of the previous coach and not the previous coach himself or herself. Okay. So In comparative degree, we can use two structures to compare similar traits. One is than that of the, and the other is than those of the. Than those of the. You use than that of the when you want to compare a singular item. When you want to compare a single item. For example, in this sentence, we compared a single program, the training program. Similarly, you can say the climate of Florida is warmer than that of Georgia. Than that of Georgia. So here you are comparing the singular trait climate. There is a single trait climate of Florida as compared to that of Georgia. So you use than that of the. Similarly, in than those of, you replace or you use it for plural items. For plural items. Than those of the is used for plural items. How will you compare? How will you put that in a sentence? For example, you can say the scores of students in class A are higher than those in class B. Than those in class B. Okay, so here you have than those. Why? Because you are comparing scores, the scores of students. You have plural items, you have multiple items that are being compared. Okay, so when you want to compare a singular item, you use than that of the. When you want to compare plural items, you use than those of the. Okay, so if that is clear, we shall move on to the next question. Neither of the applicants have submitted the required documents to the office yet. Neither of the applicants have submitted the required documents to the office yet. What is happening here? You know that the sentence begins with the distributive pronoun. The sentence begins with the distributive pronoun neither of. So what are the distributive pronouns that you know? You have each, either, neither, none, any, one, etc. These are some of the distributive pronouns that we are aware of. And along with all the distributive pronouns, we use the preposition of. So whenever you see these words along with of, you need to understand that it is a distributive pronoun. And we have also studied that all distributive pronouns are singular in subject. All distributive pronouns are singular in case or singular in form. Therefore, it has to agree with a singular verb. But what have we used here? We have used a plural verb, which is wrong. So instead of have, you should write has. All distributive pronouns are singular in structure. So instead of using the plural verb have, we have to use a singular verb has. Okay, so that is all about this. Along with distributive pronouns, you always use the preposition of, and also make sure that these are always considered singular and we have to use a singular verb along with that. The manager appreciated not only her dedication but also for her innovative ideas. Everyone was motivated by her example. The manager appreciated not only her dedication but also for her innovative ideas. Everyone was motivated by her example. Now, before we answer this question, I need you to reflect back on something that we learned earlier. In one of the previous questions, we came across both and. Both and there was a verb used here, V1, and a verb used here, V2. And I told you that the verbs on either sides of and should be of the same structure and form. Should be of the same structure and form. Now, why is that so? Because the structure both and is a correlative conjunction. It is a correlative conjunction. Similarly, you have other structures like not only but also, not only but also. Then you have either or, neither nor. All these are examples of correlative conjunction. So you have to know that in the case of correlative conjunctions, they always join identical elements. They always join identical elements. So if there is a noun on one side of the conjunction, then it has to be a noun on the other side. If there is a to infinitive verb on one side, then it has to be a to infinitive verb on the other side. If there is a noun phrase on one side, then there has to be a noun phrase on the other side. So the elements on either sides of the correlative conjunction must be the same elements, okay, or must be identical. Now, when you look in this sentence, you find another correlative conjunction, which is not only but also. Not only but also. Now you look at the structures that are placed along with these words. After not only, you have her dedication, which is a noun phrase. her dedication, which is a noun phrase. Here you have her, which is a distributive adjective, and dedication, which is a noun. So together it constitutes a noun phrase. Similarly, after but also, you should have a noun phrase. This should have been a noun phrase. But here what happened? Here you see the preposition and then the object. So this is a prepositional phrase. So they have joined a noun phrase along with a prepositional phrase. But we already said that correlative conjunctions are used to join identical elements. So if it is a noun phrase here, it should also be a noun phrase on the other side of but also. So here, instead of using prepositional phrase, you have to eliminate the preposition for and replace it with her innovative ideas. Her innovative ideas. The sentence should be, the manager appreciated not only her dedication but also her innovative ideas. So the error is in part 3. Okay, the error is in part 3. Okay. Next question. The company has decided to implement new strategies in order to boost its sale and improve customer satisfaction. The company has decided to implement new strategies in order to boost its sale and improve customer satisfaction. What is wrong here? Yes, the error is in the use of the word sale. The error is in the use of the word sale. Now, sale refers to a single transaction. It refers to a single transaction. But here you're talking about the entire business, entire commercial strategies of a company. So it has to be a plural subject. So it has to be sales, not sale. It has to be sales because sales refers to the collective revenue. To the collective revenue. Here you are talking about the sales of a company, the business of a company. So it is not just a single transaction. It talks about the entire transactions, the overall business or the collective performance. That is what we are meaning here. That is what is meant here. So instead of sale, you have to put sales. Okay. So the company has decided to implement new strategies in order to boost its sales and improve customer satisfaction. Okay. Next question. The coordinator carefully explained about the revised procedures to all the participants during the orientation session so that everyone could follow the updated guidelines without any confusion or delay. The coordinator carefully explained about the revised procedures to all the participants during the orientation session so that everyone could follow the updated guidelines without any confusion or delay. Can you find out which part contains the error? The first part is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because here you have the transitive verb explain. Explain is a transitive verb. It is always a transitive verb. And what did we discuss about transitive verbs? They always require an object. They always require an object. Now, transitive verbs are directly connected to the object. They always require an object and they are directly connected to the object. But here, if you look at this sentence, here you have a preposition that comes after the transitive verb. A preposition that comes after the transitive verb. And the object that comes later automatically becomes the object of that preposition. But we already said that transitive verbs require an object. So here, the transitive verb does not have an object. Why? Because a preposition comes in between the verb and the object. Whenever a preposition is followed by an object, the object automatically becomes that of the preposition. So here you have to eliminate the preposition. Instead, you have to simply say the coordinator carefully explained the revised procedures. Or you can simply understand it in this way. You will not use any preposition along with transitive verbs. Okay, transitive verbs will never take preposition. No preposition along with transitive verbs. No preposition along with transitive verbs. Okay, you can simply study it like this. You should not use preposition along with transitive verbs. Why? Because transitive verbs are directly connected to the object. You do not need a preposition in between. If a preposition comes, what happens is that the object becomes the object of the preposition and not of the verb. That is why we avoid prepositions. Is it clear? Now, There are certain transitive verbs which often come up in your exam like discuss, explain, tell, resemble, demand, order, etc. Make sure that along with all these words, you never use a preposition. You never use a preposition. For example, this is one question or one statement that often comes up in your exam. She resembles with her mother. She resembles with her mother. Now this sentence is wrong. Why? Because resemble is a transitive verb. It is a transitive verb. So it will not use a preposition along with it. If it uses a preposition, what happens? Her mother becomes the object of the preposition. But here it has to be the preposition of the transitive verb resemble. Okay. Similarly, she told to me that she won't come today. She told to me that she won't come today. Now, this is another question that comes up in your exam. Now, this is also wrong. Why is it wrong? Because told is a transitive verb and you will not use a preposition after a transitive verb. Okay, because a transitive verb directly connects to the object. It does not require a preposition to connect to the object. Okay, so remember these words like discuss, explain, tell, resemble, demand, order, etc. All these are transitive verbs. Transitive verbs will never take a preposition after that. Next question. The volunteers served sandwiches to all the hungry children at the shelter on paper plates decorated with colorful patterns. The volunteers served sandwiches to all the hungry children at the shelter on paper plates decorated with colorful patterns. Can you find out the error in the sentence? So the sentence is quite interesting. Why is it interesting? Because if you look at the third part of the sentence, you find on paper plates. On paper plates. Now, what is placed on paper plates? Is it sandwiches? Is it hungry children? Or is it shelter? Definitely, it has to be sandwiches. Sandwiches have to be placed on paper plates. But this part on paper plates is placed after the noun shelter. It is placed after the noun shelter. So here it means that in the sentence it means that the shelter is placed on paper plates, which is absurd, right? Which is wrong, which is a mistake. So here on paper plates has to come after sandwiches. It has to come after sandwiches because we are placing sandwiches on paper plates. So the part error is in part 3. So the volunteers served sandwiches on paper plates to all the hungry children at the shelter. Okay. So this part is also not neat. Decorated with colorful patterns should also go along with on paper plates. But since the error first comes in part 3, we have to mark part 3 as the part containing the error. Okay. Remember that any descriptional phrase, any prepositional phrase, any descriptional phrase, any modifier has to sit next to the noun or next to the subject that it is modifying. Here on paper plates modifies the subject sandwiches. So here you have to place it after the noun sandwiches. Okay. Always remember that fact. Next question. The volunteers, while collecting supplies for the flood victims, the storage facility was inspected for safety compliance. The volunteers, while collecting supplies for the flood victims, the storage facility was inspected for safety compliance. Do you know what is the error in the sentence? The first part of the sentence, the volunteers, while collecting supplies, begins with the active voice. The sentence begins with the active voice. And slowly it moves towards the passive voice. It moves towards the passive voice. Why is it the passive voice here? Because here you have the auxiliary verb plus V3 form. The auxiliary verb plus a V3 form. Instead, it should have simply been the V2 form. It should have been the V2 form because it began with the active voice. You have the subject placed at the beginning. Who is collecting supplies? The volunteers are collecting supplies. Who is inspecting the storage facility? The volunteers are inspecting the storage facility. So the volunteers or the subject comes first in the sentence. So it has to be written in the active voice. And you cannot mix two voices in a sentence. If the sentence begins with an active voice, if the sentence begins with the subject, then it has to completely follow the structure of an active voice. If the sentence begins with the object, it has to completely satisfy that of satisfy the structure of a passive voice. Now here, the volunteers are the subject. They are the doers of the action. So it begins with the subject. So it has to be in the active voice. So the volunteers, while collecting supplies for the flood victims, inspected the storage facility. Inspected the storage facility. What is the structure of active voice in simple past tense? You have subject plus V2 plus object. Subject plus V2 plus object. The volunteers, while collecting supplies for the flood victims, inspected. V2 is a simple past tense. Inspected. What is the object here? The storage facility for safety compliance. Is it correct? In the passive structure, you have object plus was plus V3 plus by plus subject. If the sentence was in the passive voice, you would have placed the volunteers at the end of the sentence. So while collecting supplies for the flood victims, the storage facility was inspected by the volunteers. That would have been the structure if the sentence is written in the passive voice. But here you have the subject at the beginning of the sentence, the volunteers at the beginning of the sentence. So it has to be in the active voice. Okay. So instead of writing the storage facility was inspected, you should write inspected the storage facility. Inspected the storage facility. Okay. Next question. Had she not postponed the meeting several times, the committee would have had a greater opportunity to discussing the budget allocations in detail before the quarterly report was finalized. Had she not postponed the meeting several times, the committee would have had a greater opportunity to discussing the budget allocations in detail before the quarterly report was finalized. Do you know what is the error here? The error is in part 3. The error is in part 3. What is the error? Here you have the preposition to. Here you have the preposition to. And after to, you have discussing, which is a gerund. You have the word discussing, which is a gerund. What is a gerund? It is the V1 plus ing form acting as a noun. V1 plus ing form acting as a noun, a gerund. So we know that after prepositions, you always require an object, and an object will always take the form of a noun or a pronoun. So in normal cases, to plus gerund is fine. To plus gerund is fine. It is grammatically correct. But here, the to is not that of a preposition. Here, the to is that of an infinitive. To plus infinitive structure. It is not a preposition. Here, to does not act as a preposition. Here, to acts as an infinitive. Why does it act as an infinitive? Because here you're talking about a purpose. Here you're talking about a purpose. When you're talking about a purpose, you have to use the infinitive form. Okay. To is used as a preposition in order to show the relationship between the words in the sentence, now between the noun and the other words in the sentence. But here it is not for showing the relationship, it is for showing the purpose. It answers the question why something is happening, what is the purpose of doing that. So here the sentence practically says that if she had not postponed the meeting several times, then they would have gotten great opportunity to discuss the budget allocations. The purpose is to discuss the budget allocations. So here you are talking about a purpose. They want to do something. What are they doing? They want to discuss the budget allocations. So here the to does not act as a preposition. It acts as an infinitive. It acts as an infinitive. And we have already studied that along with to as an infinitive, we use the base form of the verb or V1 form of the verb. And what is the V1 form of discussing? It is discuss. To discuss. So whenever you come across the word to, you have to check whether it is used as a preposition or as an infinitive. If it is used as a preposition, then it can be followed by the gerund. Why? Because a preposition always requires an object, and an object always takes the form of a noun or a pronoun. And the gerund is the V1 plus ing form of a verb that acts as a noun. So that is correct when the to is used as a preposition. To can function as a preposition and to can function as an infinitive. In this particular case, it is used as an infinitive. Okay, I'll give you an example of using to as a preposition. For example, you can say, she is used to smoking. She is used to smoking. Here, to acts as a preposition. Why? Because we are talking about her habit of smoking. Her habit of smoking. She is used to what? She is used to what? We have already learned that a noun or a pronoun answers the question what. Noun or a pronoun answers the question what. So when you ask what in the sentence, she is used to what? She is used to smoking. So you know that here smoking is a noun and here smoking is a gerund. So here to is a preposition. But in the sentence, I want to smoke. I want to smoke. Here, to is not a preposition, it is an infinitive because here you are talking about a purpose. You want to smoke. You are talking about a purpose. So here, to is an infinitive and not a preposition. Okay, so differentiate between the two and use the word that comes after it accordingly. Next question. The cybersecurity team is proficient for detecting vulnerabilities in legacy systems that often evade conventional monitoring tools and protocols during routine audits. The cybersecurity team is proficient for detecting vulnerabilities in legacy systems that often evade conventional monitoring tools and protocols during routine audits. What is wrong here? It is in the use of the fixed prepositions. It is in the use of the fixed prepositions. Here you see proficient for, which is wrong. It is proficient in, proficient in. See, there are certain adjectives which are always used along with a fixed preposition. That is why we say fixed prepositions. Okay, an adjective always accompanies a preposition. This is always the same in all cases. Okay, for example, you have proficient in, then you have proficient in, then you have adapt to, adapt to. Apologize. You have two cases of apologize, apologize to and apologize for. Apologize to someone and apologize for something. Okay, if you're apologizing for a thing that you did, then you have to use a preposition for. If you're apologizing, if the apology is addressed to someone, then you have to use a preposition to. So these are two cases of fixed prepositions. Then you have abstain from, abstain from, recover from, borrow from, aim at, aim at. So all these are certain cases of fixed prepositions. Okay. These adjectives always accompany the same prepositions. So here proficient is an adjective that is always followed by the preposition in. Okay. So the error is in part 1. It is proficient in detecting vulnerabilities. All right. Next question. That the expedition faced unforeseen challenges in the treacherous mountain terrain were evident from their delayed return and exhausted appearance. That the expedition faced unforeseen challenges in the treacherous mountain terrain were evident from their delayed return and exhausted appearance. Now in this sentence, you can see the use of the verb where. The use of the verb where, and you know where is a plural verb. Now you have to see whether the subject is singular or plural. Do you know which is the subject here? That the expedition faced unforeseen challenges in the treacherous mountain terrain. Which is the subject here? Is it challenges? Is it mountain terrain? Is it expedition? The subject is this entire noun clause. It is the entire noun clause. The sentence begins with the word that, and all the words that follow together constitute a noun clause. Now, before we move on, let me ask you, what is the difference between a noun clause and a noun phrase? Noun clause and a noun phrase. What is the difference? A noun phrase only comprises the subject. It only comprises the subject. But in noun clause, you have a subject and a verb. You have a subject and a verb. A clause, noun clause contains a subject and a verb. In both the cases, there are a group of words. But in noun clause, you also have a verb. Along with the subject, you also have a verb. Whereas in noun phrase, you do not have a verb. For example, in this particular sentence, you can say that the treacherous mountain terrain. The treacherous mountain terrain is a subject. Why? Because it is a group of words that act as a subject. The treacherous mountain terrain. Okay. Whereas the entire set of words from that to terrain constitutes a noun clause. Why? Because here you have nouns, here you have a verb faced, etc. Okay. So that the expedition faced unforeseen challenges in the treacherous mountain terrain is a noun clause. And there is only one noun clause in this particular sentence. There is only one noun clause in this particular sentence. When you have an entire noun clause that acts as a subject, then you have to consider it as a singular subject. You have an entire single noun clause acting as a subject of a sentence, then you have to consider it as a singular subject. Okay. So, in one of the cases, one of the questions that we studied earlier, we studied noun phrase 1 plus and plus noun phrase 2, right? Noun phrase 1 plus and plus noun phrase 2. There we considered it as a compound plural subject, because here you have a singular subject, here you have a singular subject, and these two are joined together by the conjunction and. There we considered it as a compound plural subject. But here you have a noun clause. Here you have a noun clause. And how many noun clauses are there? There is only one noun clause, that the expedition faced unforeseen challenges in the treacherous mountain terrain. That is just one single noun clause. So when you have an entire noun clause acting as a subject, then you have to consider it as a singular subject. You have to consider it as a singular subject. Therefore, the use of where is wrong. Instead, you should use was. Instead, you use was. Now, I'll give you another example of a sentence with two noun clauses. What he says, and what he does. What he says and what he does, blank, two different things. Two different things. So here you have to find out the subject. Here you have to find out the subject. We just discussed that a noun clause, you have an entire noun clause acting as a subject. How many noun clauses are here? Here you have one noun clause, one subject, one verb. This is noun clause 1. This is the second part. One subject, one verb. This is noun clause 2. So here you have two noun clauses that come together, that together act as a subject. Therefore, it has to be considered as a plural subject. Two noun clauses that comes together and act as a subject. Therefore, you have to consider it as a plural subject. So here the correct form of the verb is are. The correct form of the verb is are. At the same time, if the sentence is what he says in meetings, blank, unreliable. What he says in meetings, blank, unreliable. Here, how many noun clauses do you have? You have one subject, one verb, and one noun clause. And this entire noun clause acts as the subject of the sentence. So since there is only one subject, since there is only one noun clause, we consider it as a singular subject, and therefore we use the singular form of the verb is. Okay, so what he says in meetings is unreliable. So remember that when you have when you get a sentence that contains one noun clause acting as the entire subject of a sentence, you have to consider it as a singular subject and use a singular form of the verb. But if you have more than one noun clause that act as a subject, then you have to consider it as a plural subject and you have to use the plural form of the verb. Okay, I hope that is clear. We'll move on to the next question. The committee, which oversees multiple departments, has been granted additional funds to implement the new sustainability policies across all regional offices. The committee, which oversees multiple departments, has been granted additional funds to implement the new sustainability policies across all regional offices. So here, I'm pretty sure that you all must have gotten this question correct, because here you have committee. Here you have committee. And you know committee can be considered as a collective noun. But we have learned that committee can act both as a singular collective unit and as a plural collective unit. When does it act as a plural collective unit? See, words like committee, jury, etc. They can be considered as singular collective noun or plural collective noun. How will you differentiate between the two? When does it act as singular and when does it act as plural? When they have unanimously agreed upon something, when there is a unanimous decision, when all the members of the committee, when all the members of the jury reaches a final decision or reaches a final argument, then you can consider it as a single unit. But if they are divided in their opinions, if there is a division in their opinions, if the jury consists of 5 judges, 3 of them agree to one proposal and 2 disagree, there is a division of opinion, right? In that case, it can be considered as a plural unit. So these are the two cases of considering words like committee, jury, family, etc. When they act as a single unit, when they all have the same responses, when they all have the same opinions, they can be considered as a single unit. But when there is a difference of opinion, you have to consider it as a plural unit. Now, so how will you identify whether committee is used in the singular or in the plural sense in this sentence? See, when you look at the verb has, you know that it is a singular verb. So it has to agree with the singular subject. So therefore, we know that committee is used in the used as a singular collective unit. That is one way of knowing that. Or else you can simply identify from the sentence that there is no mentioning of granting funds separately, right? It is mentioned that a committee has been granted additional funds. It is not said that only a few branches of the committee or only a few members of the committee are granted funds. It is not mentioned like that. They have collectively mentioned that the committee has been granted additional funds. So that also indicates that the committee functions as a singular collective unit in this sentence. So since it is a singular subject, now we understood that it is a singular subject. Is the use of oversee correct? Oversee is a plural verb. For a singular subject, you do not use a plural verb. You use a singular verb, which is oversees. Oversees. So committee is used in the singular sense here. How did we understand that it is used in the singular sense? One way of identification is by looking at the verb has. You know, has is in the singular sense, so it means that committee functions as a singular unit there. Or else from the sentence itself, you can identify that there is no mentioning of a separation in the committee. You are not saying that funds are granted separately or the committee is divided. No words like that come in the sentence. So again, you know that committee functions as a singular collective unit in the sentence. So since it is a singular subject, you have to use the singular form of the verb, which is overseas. Okay. Now, next question. Were she to have known about the danger, she might have taken different precautions to ensure her safety and avoid the unfortunate incident. Here, when you look at the second part of the sentence, might have taken, you identify that it is in the format might plus have plus V3. Where do we use the structure? This is used in the third conditional. Third conditional or the type 3 conditional sentence. The third conditional. What is the third conditional? It is the imaginary past. The imaginary past, an impossible event or a hypothetical event in the past. That is the structure of the third conditional. This is the structure of the main clause. Main clause. Okay, so we understood that when we looked at the sentence, we understood that might have taken as the third conditional structure. And in the main clause, we use might or would or might plus have plus V3 to indicate the imaginary past situation, a hypothetical past situation. Now, if this is the structure of the main clause, what is the structure of the if clause? What is the structure of the if clause? It should be if plus subject plus had plus V3. If plus subject plus had plus V3, or you can say had plus subject plus V3. Had plus subject plus V3. There are two cases. This is the normal case and this is the inverted case. Inversion. The structure of inversion. This is the normal structure. So in third conditional if clause, here you have if plus subject plus had plus V3, or in the case of inversion, you can put it as had plus subject plus V3. But here look at the sentence, look at the if clause here. Were she to have known about the danger? Is it written in the third conditional? No. So part 1 is wrong. How will you rewrite it? Had she known about the danger? You can write had she known about the danger. Had she known about the danger. Or you can say if she had known about the danger. If she had known about the danger. So if you are putting if there, you do not have to invert the structure. But if there is no if, you have to invert the structure. You have to put the auxiliary verb, then the subject, and then the main verb, past participle form of the verb. Okay. So how did we identify that this is the third conditional? By looking at the structure of the main clause. We have might plus have plus V3, which is the third conditional structure of main clause in the imaginary past. So we know that the if clause has to be written in either if plus subject plus had plus V3 form or had plus subject plus V3 form. Okay, so either you can write had she known about the danger or you can write if she had known about the danger. Now, look at the structure that is used here. Were she to have known about the danger? In which conditional is that structure written in? The structure that is given to you, were she to have known about the danger, that is written in the second conditional sentence. Second conditional sentence. This is the one that we use in second conditional. What does second conditional indicate? Second conditional indicates a hypothetical situation in the present or the future. Hypothetical or imaginary or unlikely situations in the present or the future. For example, we say, if I were a bird, I would fly. Okay, if I were a bird, I would fly. If I were you, I would take up the job. The inverted structure of that is, were she to have known about the danger, or were I a bird, I would fly. Okay, were we to win the lottery, we could travel. If I were to win the lottery, I could travel. Did you understand the difference? So in this particular sentence, the rest of the sentence talks about an imaginary past. So we know that we have to use it in the third conditional. So we replace the first part. Now, if the sentence was talking about something that is imaginary in the present or the future, then you had to change the main clause into the second conditional structure. Next question. The central bank's decision not only aimed to curb inflation but also intended to stimulate economic growth, a dual objective that proved challenging to balance effectively. The central bank's decision not only aimed to curb inflation but also intended to stimulate economic growth, a dual objective that proved challenging to balance effectively. What is the error here? Let me tell you, here the error is not in the use of grammar. It is in the use of the word curve. The use of the word curve is wrong. Why? Because here you are talking about restricting inflation or checking inflation or limiting inflation. What is a word that means restrict, check, or limit? It is curb. Curb. To curb inflation. It is not curb, it is curb, because you're talking about the bank's decision to check or to restrict inflation, to reduce inflation, and the correct use of the word is curb and not curve. Curve literally means a bend or an arc, but here we are not talking about that. Here we are talking about restricting inflation. Okay. Next. He seldom, if never, visits his family even though they live in the same town. He seldom, if never, visits his family even though they live in the same town. What is wrong here? So here the error is in the use of the phrase seldom, if never. Seldom, if never. This is the part that contains the error. What is wrong? It is seldom, if ever. Seldom, if ever. This is an adverbial phrase. This is an adverbial phrase. What does it mean? Seldom, if ever. It actually means rarely. It actually means rarely. Very something that happens very rarely or almost never. That is the meaning of seldom. So if you remember, when we talked about certain adverbs like rarely, hardly, scarcely, etc., I told you never to use the word never along with these words, because these words inherently mean something negative. So you do not need another negative word along with it to indicate negation. So along with these words, you will not use words like never, not, no, none, etc. Okay. Similar is the case with seldom. Seldom is also a word that practically means rarely, and seldom, if ever, is the adverbial phrase to indicate something that happens very rarely or almost never. So you can either write it as he seldom, if ever, visits his family, or you can say he never visits his family. Okay. Seldom, if ever, or you can write he rarely visits his family. He never visits his family. All this is right, but you cannot combine seldom and never. Okay, because as I already told you, seldom is also a word that has an inherent negative meaning in it. So you do not need another negative word along with it. So the correct use of the phrase is seldom, if ever. Okay. Next question. The committee recommended that the proposal is reviewed by an independent expert to ensure impartiality before final approval. The committee recommended that the proposal is reviewed by an independent expert to ensure impartiality before final approval. Do you know what the error is? It is in part 2. It is in part 2. What is the error here? Here you find the verb recommended. the verb recommended. Now, there are certain verbs like recommend, demand, insist, propose, suggest, etc. Okay, there are certain verbs like recommend, demand, insist, propose, suggest, etc. All these verbs are used in the subjunctive mood. All these words are used in the subjunctive mood. What does it mean by subjunctive mood? It is a verb form that is used to express wishes, to express wishes, hypothetical situations, to express wishes, hypothetical situations, demands, demands, or suggestions. So these are verb forms that are used to indicate or that are used to express wishes, hypothetical situations, demands, suggestions, etc. And they mostly contain strong verbs like recommend, demand, insist, propose, suggest, etc. So whenever you come across these kind of words that express some kind of a wish or a demand or suggestion, etc., there you have to use the bare infinitive form along with these verbs. You have to use the bare infinitive form. Which is a bare infinitive form? The V1 or the base form of the verb. So whenever you come across these words like recommend, demand, insist, propose, etc., along with the that clause, make sure that you use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form or the base form of the verb along with it. Base form of the verb along with it. So when you look here, the committee recommended that the proposal is reviewed. Is reviewed. So here you know this is not the base form. Which is the base form of is? It is be. It is be. The bare infinitive form or the base form or the V1 form is be. So the correct answer is the committee recommended that the proposal be reviewed by an independent expert to ensure impartiality before final approval. Okay. Next question. The new decorative pillows perfectly complement the colors of the sofa and the curtains, tying the whole room together. The new decorative pillows perfectly complement the colors of the sofa and the curtains, tying the whole room together. Do you know what is the error here? The error is in the use of the word complement. The word complement. Complement. You have two words that sound the same. Complement. You have complement with an I and complement with an E. See, compliment with an I means a praise. To praise somebody, to express admiration, to appreciate somebody. Okay, he gave her a nice compliment. I was complimented for my dress. I was complimented for my for the presentation of my seminar or for the presentation of my speech. Okay, so compliment basically means praise or appreciate. Now, complement with an E means something that completes or enhances something else, something that you add to another thing to complete it, to enhance it. That is the meaning of complement with an E. Now, in this sentence, which of these is the correct one? The new decorative pillows perfectly complement the colors of the sofa and the curtains. So, these pillows are added to the sofa and the curtains in order to enhance its look, enhance its appearance. So here it is not complement with an I, it is complement with an E. Okay. Next question. The research team concluded that each participant must submit their reports before the deadline on Monday. The research team concluded that each participant must submit their reports before the deadline. So in this sentence, you have each participant, each participant. Each is a distributive adjective and you have the participant noun. Each participant. Okay. So each participant is a singular subject. It is a singular subject. When we studied distributive pronouns also, we said the same thing. All distributive pronouns are considered singular. Similarly, each participant, when you use a distributive adjective with a singular noun, it is considered as a singular subject. So each participant must submit. You should not use a plural noun along with it. It has to be the singular noun his. It has to be the singular noun his. So the error is in part 3. Now you might ask, can't we use her? You can use her. It is not actually wrong to use her, but see, from an exam point of view, when the gender is not specified in the sentence, we always go with the masculine gender. In common usages, you can use both his and her. It is not wrong to use her, but from an exam point of view, you have to use his, because unless the gender is specified, you will go with the masculine gender along with such distributive adjectives or distributive pronouns. So here the error is in the use of the plural pronoun there, because here you have a singular subject. Each participant is a singular subject, so therefore you have to use a singular pronoun, but there is a plural pronoun. Instead, you have to use a singular pronoun, his. Okay. Next, he drives very reckless on the highway, ignoring all traffic rules. He drives very reckless on the highway, ignoring all traffic rules. Here you have drives, drives. Now, you know that verbs are of two types. Verbs are of many types. One of the classification of verbs is into dynamic and stative. Dynamic and stative. What are dynamic verbs? Verbs that denote an action. Whereas stative verbs are those that denote a state of being. A state of being. And you should know that along with dynamic verbs or along with verbs that denote an action, you use an adverb. You use an adverb. You use an adverb to modify dynamic verbs. Adverb to modify dynamic verbs. Whereas you use an adjective to modify a stative verb. You use an adjective to modify a stative verb. So here drives. Drives is an action word, right? Drives is an action word. It denotes a state of action. It denotes an action. So it is a dynamic verb. And what is reckless? Reckless. Reckless is actually an adjective. Reckless is actually an adjective. So you have to replace it with the adverb form, which is recklessly. Recklessly. Okay. So drives is a dynamic verb. It is a dynamic verb, and dynamic verbs or action verbs always use an adverb along with it. Whereas stative verbs, which indicate a state of being, uses an adjective along with it. So here he drives very reckless. Drives is a dynamic verb. So here you should use the adverb of reckless, which is recklessly. Now, can you give me an example of a stative verb that uses an adjective? You can say the food tastes bitter. The food tastes bitter. Here tastes. Taste is a stative verb. Taste is a stative verb. It tells you a state of being, or it tells you a feeling. It is not just a state of being. It is a feeling or an emotion. So here taste is a stative verb. It tells you a feeling. Therefore, and we have used an adjective bitter. We have used an adjective bitter along with it. It is not bitterly, it is bitter. The flower smells sweetly is wrong, because sweetly is an adverb, but smell is a stative verb. Along with the stative verb, we only use an adjective. So here the food tastes bitter. But here it is, he drives very recklessly, because drive is a dynamic verb. Okay. Next question. The strict rules of the library don't let students to take more than 2 books out at a time, which is often inconvenient for researchers. The strict rules of the library don't let students to take more than 2 books out at a time, which is often inconvenient for researchers. Do you know what is the error in the sentence? Here you find the verb let. Here you find the verb let. Now what kind of a verb is let? It is a causative verb. It is a causative verb. Now which are some other causative verbs that you are familiar with? You have make, have, let, get, help. These are some of the most commonly used causative verbs. Now what is the use of a causative verb? A causative verb is used to show that someone or something want an event to happen, but instead of them doing it themselves, they make somebody else do it. For example, you say, the teacher made the students close the door. The teacher made the students close the door. So the teacher wanted the door to be closed, but instead of she getting up and going, going and closing the door, she is making the students do it. So here make is used in the causative verb sense. Okay, it is used in the causative verb sense. Similarly, you can say She let her sister play the piano. She let her sister play the piano. So instead of herself playing the piano, she allowed her sister to play the piano. So these are certain examples of causative verbs: make, have, let, get, help, etc. Now, along with causative verbs, you only use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form. Along with causative verbs, you only use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form. The only exception is in the case of the verb get. Get. So along with all causative verbs, you use the bare infinitive or the V1 form. But along with get, you use the to infinitive form. For example, I got a mechanic to fix my car engine. I got a mechanic to fix my car engine. So here you have used the causative verb got and the to plus V1 or the to infinitive structure. But at the same time, in all the other causative verbs, for example, the ones that we discussed earlier, the teacher made the students close the door. It is not the teacher made the students to close the door. That is wrong. She let her sister play the piano. It is not she let her sister to play the piano. No. Along with all causative verbs except get, you only use the bare infinitive form. But with forget, you have to use the to infinitive form. Is it clear to you? So in this sentence, you have used the causative verb let, and you have the to infinitive structure here, to take more than two books, which is wrong because just now we said that make, have, let, help, all these uses the bare infinitive form. So we will not use to, you will simply use V1 or take. So the correct sentence is, the strict rules of the library don't let students take more than two books out at a time. Okay, so when you encounter such a sentence, look which causative verb is used in the sentence. If it is get, you have to use a to infinitive form. But along with all the other sentences, all the other causative verbs, you can use the bare infinitive form. You should use the bare infinitive form. Okay. Next question. The committee insisted that each member provides a written report before the final presentation scheduled next week. The committee insisted that each member provides a written report before the final presentation scheduled next week. Now, do you know the answer to this question? You must know the answer to this question because we discussed this concept a little earlier. Yes, here you find the verb insisted. You find the verb insisted. So if you remember, a little while ago, we discussed certain words that are used in the subjunctive mode, which were the verbs that we studied. Words like insist, demand, propose, suggest, order, ask, etc. Right? Tell. All these were examples of verbs that are used in the subjunctive mode. Why do we use the subjunctive mode? To express a wish or to express a demand, proposition, a suggestion, etc. So in this case also, you find such a word. And what did we study regarding words used in the subjunctive mode? We have to use the V1 form or the bare infinitive form or the base form of the verb. But what form of the verb have we used here? It is V5. It is V5. We have an S at the end. So this is wrong. Instead of provides, we have to use provide. We have to use provide. The committee insisted that each member provide a written report before the final presentation. Here, do not get confused by seeing the word each. You should not think each member is singular, right? So provides is correct. No, you have to look at the verb that comes before. We have a strong verb like insist. So the sentence insist and that, you have the verb insist plus a that clause. So it has to be written in the subjunctive mode. Okay. Next question. The number of participants in the advanced workshop were surprisingly low given the extensive promotion. The number of participants in the advanced workshop were surprisingly low given the extensive promotion. Do you know what the error is in the sentence? Here you have the number of. The number of. The phrase the number of is singular. The phrase the number of is singular, no matter what comes after that. Here you see participants, so you feel like where is correct because participants is plural, so you have to use a plural verb. No, it is wrong. The number of is a phrase that is used to indicate a singular subject, a singular form, a singular structure. Whereas if the structure is a number of participants, then it is in the plural form. Then it is in the plural form. Remember that when it is the number of, it is the singular structure. It is in the singular structure. No matter what comes after that, be it a singular noun or a plural noun, it doesn't matter. If the first part is the number of, then it has to be considered as a singular subject. So here the use of where is wrong. Instead, it should be was surprisingly low. But instead of the number of participants, if it were a number of participants, then it would have been were surprisingly low, because a number of, the phrase a number of is used in the plural sense. Is it clear? So you have the number of, which is used in the singular sense, and a number of in the plural sense. So the next question is, after years of hard work, he finally decided to call off from his struggling business and start anew in a different field. After years of hard work, he finally decided to call off from his struggling business and start anew in a different field. The error is in part 2. The error is in part 2. What is the error here? Here you have the phrasal verb call off and then a preposition from. Now what is a phrasal verb? Phrasal verbs are usually words that, two or more words that come together to form a completely new meaning. You have a verb. Along with a verb, you have either an adverb or a preposition. You can add more words along with verb. Basically, you can say a verb and a particle that comes together to create a new meaning altogether. To create a new meaning altogether. It will be entirely different from the actual meaning of that verb. Okay. So here you have call off. Call off. Now, call off is a verb plus preposition. Here the verb call and the preposition off come together to mean to end something, to put an end to something, to call off, to end something. Okay, so here you already have a verb and a preposition that comes together, so you do not need another preposition along with that. Okay, to call off itself means to end something, so you do not need another preposition to enhance the meaning of that sentence. So it is a phrasal verb. Call off is a phrasal verb. So drop some other phrasal verbs that you're familiar with in the comments below. Let me know if you're familiar with phrasal verbs or not. So here I hope you understood the meaning. Call off itself is a phrasal verb that means to end. So you do not need another preposition after the phrasal verb. Okay. Next question. Had the manager explained the policy clearly to the staff members, they would not have made so many confusions. Had the manager explained the policy clearly to the staff members, they would not have made so many confusions. What is the error here? Which part contains the error? The error is in part 4. The error is in part 4. What is wrong? Because confusion is actually an uncountable noun. Confusion is actually an uncountable noun. So you cannot actually say confusions. Okay, you do not pluralize it by saying confusion. Similarly, many is a word that is used along with a countable noun. Many is used along with a countable noun. For example, you can say there are many books on the table, there are many pens on the table, there are many showpieces in that shop. So many is used along with countable nouns. But we said that confusion is an uncountable noun. Confusion is an uncountable noun. You cannot count the number of confusions, right? You cannot now count the number of confusions. So instead of writing so many confusions, it has to be so much confusion. So much confusion, because much is used along with uncountable nouns. Much is used along with uncountable nouns, whereas many is used along with countable nouns. Okay. Here you can say so many mistakes, because mistakes are countable. You can count the number of mistakes that you have made. But you cannot say so many confusions. It has to be so much confusion. Okay. Next. The novice programmer made a blunder mistake in the coding which crashed the entire system. The novice programmer made a blunder mistake in the coding which crashed the entire system. Can you find out the error here? Yes, the error is in part 2. The error is in part 2. Here you have used two words that mean the same thing together. A blunder is also a mistake. A mistake is also a mistake. You should not use two words that mean the same thing together in a sentence. So it should either be the novice programmer made a blunder in the coding, or it should have been the novice programmer made a mistake or made a huge mistake in the coding. A blunder is a huge mistake, a great mistake. So instead of using a blunder mistake, instead of using two words that mean the same thing, you should have either used a blunder or a great mistake or a huge mistake. Okay, so make sure that when you read a sentence, you do not use words, or there are no words that have the same meaning used together. For example, she returned back from the meeting. She returned back from the meeting. What is the error in the sentence? See, return and coming back is the same thing. Return and coming back is the same thing. So you can either write she returned from the meeting, or you can write she came back from the meeting, because both of it means that coming back from somewhere, returning from somewhere. So you do not have to use return and back together in the sentence. You can either use return or you can use come back. Similarly, this is the sum total of all purchases. This is the sum total of all purchases. Here also, sum and total practically means the same thing. You can either say this is the total of all purchases, or you can say this is the sum of all purchases. You do not have to say sum total. Okay. So that is another superfluous error or a redundant error where you're repeating the same thing again and again. Another sentence, another very common mistake is, can you repeat it again? Can you repeat it again? See, repeat itself means saying something again. Repeat itself means saying something again. So you should not ask, can you repeat it again? You can simply ask, can you repeat it? Or you can say, can you say it again? Because repeat is equal to say again. Repeat is equal to say again. So you either say, can you repeat it? Or you say, can you say it again? Okay. So these are some examples of superfluous errors or redundant errors where you use the same word where you use two words that mean the same thing again and again in a sentence. So make sure that when you read such a sentence, there are no such words in that particular sentence. So here blunder and mistake are practically the same. So there is no need of using both the words in a single sentence. Next. The sudden influx of tourists attracted by the newly opened resort have caused significant strain on the local infrastructure. I want you all to answer this question. Drop the answer in the comments below. Let me see if you have understood what I've taught you until now, because we have looked at similar patterned questions in the first part of our class. So if you have understood what I've said, I want you to answer the question. So please drop the answer in the comments below. The 38th question. The director explained that the report was delayed because the data was not yet collected. The director explained that the report was delayed because the data was not yet collected. Here you have two actions that are happening in the past. Two actions in the past. Which are the two actions? One is the delaying of the report. The delaying of the report. And the second is the data not being collected. The second is the data not being collected. So you have two actions in the past. Since the data was not collected, the report was delayed. Two actions in the past. So whenever you have a sentence that discusses two actions in the past, then you have to put, or you have to write, the older of the two situations. The older of the two situations in the past perfect tense. The older of the two situations in the past perfect tense, and the other one in the simple past tense, other in the simple past tense. Okay, so when you have two actions in the past, when the sentence discusses two actions in the past, the older of the two actions has to be written in the past perfect tense, and the other one has to be written in the simple past tense. Now here, which is the older of the two actions? Is it the data not being collected or the delaying of the report? It is the data not being collected. Because the data was not collected, the report was delayed. So the data had to be collected before the report. So the older of the two actions is the data not being collected. But here, is it written in the past perfect tense? Is was not yet collected in the past perfect tense? No, this is wrong. So instead of was not yet collected, how will you rewrite it? Because the data had not yet been collected. The data had not yet been collected, because the collection of the data is the older of the two events, and it has to be written in the past perfect tense. But in the sentence, it is written in the simple past tense, so we change it into the past perfect. 39th question. The newly discovered species was quite unique, possessing characteristics that set it apart from all its non-relatives. The newly discovered species was quite unique, possessing characteristics that set it apart from all its known relatives. Can you identify the error in the sentence? Subject, woman, everything is correct, but there are small mistakes. Small there are the use of word quite unique. The use of the word quite unique. You know it is wrong. It is called absolute adjectives. Absolute adjectives. We know that adjective in positive, comparative, and superlative. Positive, comparative, and the superlative degree. But there are certain adjectives which cannot be written in the comparative or the superlative degree, or it cannot actually be graded. Cannot be graded. Cannot be graded. And these adjectives are called the absolute adjectives, because these adjectives denote something that is maximum, something that is perfect, something that is absolute. You cannot grade it. You cannot express it in the comparative or the superlative degree. And unique is one such word. Unique is one such word. Do you know other examples of these words? One is dead. Then you have perfect, complete, eternal, universal. All these unique. All these are examples of absolute adjectives. Absolute adjectives mean something that expresses something in the maximum or the perfect or the absolute state. So you cannot actually grade it again. So unique is one such adjective. Therefore, you cannot use other words like very, much, quiet, more, must, more, most, etc. along with these adjectives. So the use of quiet along with unique is wrong. You cannot grade it using any other words. Okay, so it should be the newly discovered species was unique. Okay, whenever you come across these words, you cannot say more dead or more perfect or most complete or more eternal. These are the absolute states. You cannot use another word to describe it more. Okay, so that is the error in this sentence. And now we have reached the last question of the day. Okay, question 40. They are planning to build a research center near the river where will scientists conduct environmental studies in the coming years. They are planning to build a research center near the river where will scientists conduct environmental studies in the coming years. Can you find out the error in the sentence? So if you look closely in the part 3 of the sentence, you can see that there is an inversion that is happening here. There is an inversion that is happening here. Here you have the auxiliary verb, then you have the subject, and then you have the main verb. There is an inversion that is taking place in this part of the sentence. But do you actually need an inversion here? No, because this is a normal assertive statement. It is a normal assertive statement. You do not need an inversion here. But why have they used an inversion? It is to confuse you. Why? Because of the WH word where. Because of the WH word where. You know that we already studied that in interrogative statements. In interrogative statements, we use inversion. Interrogative statements, we use inversion. And how will you identify interrogative statements? Using the WH words. You have why, what, where, when, and how. All these are examples of interrogative words or WH words. So here, when you see the word where, you might think that it is a interrogative word. WH is an interrogative word. So there is a need of inversion. No, You only use inversion in interrogative statements, in questions, but this is a statement. This is an assertive statement, so there is no need of an inversion here. So you simply write, they are planning to build a research center near the river where scientists will conduct environmental studies. You should simply follow the structure subject plus verb. There is no need of inversion because here where is not an interrogative word. Here where is a relative clause. A relative clause. Where is used to introduce a relative clause. So when WH words are used to introduce a relative clause, you do not use an inversion along with it. You use inversion only when it is used in an interrogative statement. For example, in where is my bag? Where is my bag? Here you have inverted the structure because here you have the auxiliary verb and here you have the subject. So here you inverted it because it is a question. It is an interrogative statement. But in normal statements, in assertive statements where you've come across WH words introducing a relative clause, you will not use inversion. So here will scientists conduct is wrong. You have to use a normal structure. Scientists will conduct. Scientists will conduct. Okay. So that is the final question that we have to discuss in this particular session. And with that, we have completed the top 40 error detection questions from the SSC CGL 2025 examination. Remember that we did not just discuss 40 individual questions, but along with them, we have also completely mastered the most critical concepts and core grammar rules that are necessary to ace your upcoming exam. And I hope that every single question and the concept behind those questions is perfectly clear to you now. Make sure that you go back through the notes that you have taken down tonight and carefully review those particular rules or exceptions or concepts that you find tricky or confusing. Okay. And also please do share your reviews, suggestions, or any doubts that you have in the comment section below. Keep practicing, stay focused, and we'll meet in another class in another session. Thank you so much for watching and all the very best for your exams.